Right now is what most consider to be the most exciting time in the realm of Final Fantasy XIV, that being the announcement of the new upcoming expansion. With Dawntrail now on the distant horizon, players can expect to see more information about the expansion in the following months. Information of the likes of new features, new content, and of course, new job changes. Throughout the history of 14, job changes have arguably been some of, if not, the most exciting changes when approaching a new expansion. We get new jobs, new reworks, new whatever this is. So yeah, while most of these jobs are often met with an overwhelming amount of hype, some others are rather met with emotions like confusion, discontent, or worst of all, anger. And if there's one job that has faced all of this, then that one job has to be Scholar and Blue Mage, but we don't talk about them. But why Scholar? Why does this bookworm get so much hate from the players? Well, I could simply just tell you about how clunky their toolkit is, but that'd be boring. And you can probably find someone more experienced to tell you otherwise. Instead, let me take you back to a time where Scholar reigned supreme, not only for their efficiency in raids, but also for their variety of actions. Stormblood Scholar was the last we ever saw of this, being known far and wide as the premium shield healer. To boot, this Scholar also came with a much more interesting rotation, managing multiple damage over time spells, each with different casts and durations, while also having to make small micro decisions in order to maximize efficiency, like, do I spend my Aether Flow to restore MP? Or do I use it to heal my party members? Do I prioritize damage and use Shadow Flare? Or do I use Sacred Soil for more mitigation? Do I summon Eos for more healing? Or do I summon Celine for more party support? Obviously Eos because she is best girl, but you did not hear that from me. All this is to say that Scholar was a much more engaging job in the past, with a toolkit that allowed for more split-second decision making, which was then all lost when the Shadowbringers incident happened. What? Healers now only have like 2 damage buttons? What do you mean Dark Knight became Warrior 2.0? Why is Black Mage like the only job that lost nothing? Not just Scholar, but pretty much all of the jobs were sent through the ringer in the Shadowbringers expansion, cutting down on some of the button blow while streamlining their rotations. Dare I say, homogenizing them. A scary word, I know, but the worst has yet to come. Just like every other healer, Scholar lost many of their options. Instead of having both Bio and Miasma, now the only damage over time spell they have is Biolysis, which admittedly looks cool, but again, is their one and only damage over time spell. Instead of having to choose between Shadow Flare and Sacred Soil, now you don't have to, because Shadow Flare was just removed from the game. Instead of choosing Celine over Eos for her party support, now you just have Eos 2.0, but with a Celine skin. But hey, at least you now get Seraph. What do you mean Seraph locks you out of your fairy tools? Yeah, despite all of this, Scholar surprisingly was not the most problematic healer at the time, because their fellow healer Astrologian received even more hate for their changes. Similarly to Scholar, Astro used to have a variety of tools that gave them many options in battle, the most notable being these cards that come with unique buffs, which can be given to your party members. Going to Shadowbringers, however, the cards instead all just provide the same damage buff with little to no variation whatsoever. A gross simplification of their card system, yes, but one that was arguably necessary. The old system was unhealthy for the job, as some cards were just objectively better than others, meaning your performance hinged on complete RNG. In other words, Astro became less fun, but more balanced. Wait, what was this video about again? For the time being, Scholar escaped some of the limelight, but as the expansion continued on, more and more players are finding themselves discontent with the job. Add another year of waiting due to the worst debuff in the world, and what you have are anxiously high expectations for their changes in the next expansion. And when that next expansion did come around, things only got worse. Endwalker was announced, and everything slowly built up to the perfect dumpster fire. What first had players concerned was the announcement that most jobs would not undergo any reworks like they would have in the past. Rather, they would resemble their Shadowbringers iterations but have their tools skewed towards a 2-minute burst meta. This was worrying, as this entailed that jobs like Scholar would still retain most of its issues going to Endwalker. But what really started the fire was the reveal of a new job in Sage. From the get-go, Sage was confirmed to be another shield healer, one in direct competition with Scholar.
Actually, Astro was a shield healer too.
And yes, Astro did have a shield stance, but come Endwalker, they would lose it. And all I can say is, Regen Astro was better anyways, and to say the least, players were worried. From the over-the-top animations to the concept of healing through dealing damage, many fell in love with the new job and continued pushing Scholar away. Of course, there were still some Scholar mains who remained loyal, but the straw that broke the camel's back came in the form of the Endwalker job action trailer. And this was the beginning of the end.
Okay, so we got a new bro animation and that green party buff thing? I mean, that's fine. Oh, and funny running Lala, of course. Can't miss that. Oh, and now Art of War looks like its own spell and not stolen from PvP. Neat. Wait, was that it? Really?
With the reveal of Sage and its impressive showcase, now players are doubling down on the Scholar hate. Wherever you looked, whether it be Twitter or Reddit, there was a bandwagon that seemed to grow in number by the hour. Memes are being chucked out that ridiculed the job while propping up Sage as the one and only Scholar killer. This one is my favorite. The outrage was so bad that, in the next live letter, the developers had to outright state that Scholar was going to be fine, and that the addition of Sage would not take away from the job whatsoever. Still, that was not enough to calm down the masses, and Scholar continued to be hated upon up until the second Endwalker dropped. But before we continue, let's take a step back for a moment and question whether or not the hate was warranted. Was Scholar as bad as players are making the job out to be? The answer? No? Performance-wise, Scholar has always been one of the better healers, even at its worst. The fact that you provide shields that can outright ignore rain mechanics while also providing your party some utility was too good not to bring. Where the job did falter, however, was in its gameplay, ranging from clear design flaws to just being boring to play. The latter is subjective, of course, but for the majority of players, this is what sells a job for them, in addition to other factors like the job's aesthetic and class fantasy. Scholar unfortunately being less popular in many of these regards, but the worst of their problems stem from how unresponsive their fairy was, which is ironic given that the fairy is what makes Scholar, well, Scholar. When the Scholar ordered their fairy to cast an action, the fairy would delay the cast by seconds. This more than often led to ghosting, an incident where the fairy would just not cast an action despite having been ordered to. And when you were ordering them to cast actions back to back, things did not look pretty. So for their most iconic feature to be as spotty as it was, that had set the precedent for what you would expect from the rest of the job. But going to Endwalker, the developers had confirmed that there would be changes to the pet AI, though they were rather tight-lipped on what exactly was being changed, but the few remaining Scholar mains continued to huff on their copium until then. Speaking of which, hey, Endwalker, yeah, I love homogenization. Jokes aside, Endwalker jobs were very interesting, to say the least. You had Bard just blowing every other ranged DPS out of the water. You had Ninja somehow having more animation locks than even Dragoon. You had Paladin dealing such underwhelming damage that they were banned from some party finders. But none of that matters. What really matters is the question of, was Scholar dead? And the answer? An astounding no. Scholar has never felt any better. Yes, they may not have the buttons or complexity of pretty Shadowbringer Scholar, but the actual act of playing the job itself simply felt at its best. With Endwalker, Scholar mostly received quality of life changes. The only new buttons they were given were Protraction and Expedient. Protraction is a straightforward ability, increasing a party member's maximum HP while also increasing their HP recovery. But Expedient, on the other hand, is where things got interesting. Prior to Endwalker, Expedient was what fueled much of the Scholar hate, as players believe having the ability that increased movement speed was a lazy attempt at giving the job a new button. And while this concept of an ability can come off as lazy, The actual impact of Expedient was very much underestimated. Players often forget that 14 is a position-heavy game. Almost every raid mechanic in this game is resolved by moving to a position within a small window of time, so having an ability that increases the party's movement speed reduces the margin of error, making raid progression much easier. Top that off with damage mitigation, and what you have is one of the best abilities in the game. Expedient was so good that the ability was then nerfed within the next major patch, cutting the duration of the increased movement speed in half. But what really changed the game for Scholar were the quality of life changes, and the most important ones were related to the fairy. No longer will the fairy delay actions by seconds, but will instead cast them almost immediately. And I say almost because there is still a small delay, especially when multiple actions are being ordered back to back, but with their other quality of life change, there is no need to do so. Scholar's main damage spell, Broil, had its cast time shortened, leaving room for an additional ability before having to cast Broil again, meaning your fairy abilities no longer have to be crammed within small windows, but can instead be spaced out without any delay. The only means for the fairy to ghost actions now is ordering certain abilities right before the summoning or dismissal of Seraph, which is less of a design issue and more of a poor choice on behalf of the Scholar. In other words, skill issue. All in all, Scholar has received many desired changes, but does that rectify them of all hate? Coming from someone who loves Scholar even when no one else did, I'd say not entirely. The job still has a clunky toolkit, being the only healer who still has to trade healing for damage, while also having many abilities that do not interact with each other. And of course, the job has not changed in aesthetics or thematics whatsoever. But most importantly, Endwalker Scholar still plays the same as Shadowbringers Scholar, but with more ease of use. Likely, if you did not enjoy playing Scholar and Shadowbringers, then the chance of you enjoying Scholar and Endwalker is rather low. Regardless, I think everyone can agree on the objective fact that Scholar has never played as smooth as it does now, and whether or not Square Enix manages to add on to the foundation they had set, us players will have to wait until Dawntrail to see otherwise. So in the meantime, go out there and enjoy or hate Scholar, and keep in mind that Sage is just a great value version of Scholar.
History answers me, please.